Welcome to a presentation of the James City County Williamsburg Master Gardener Association. Today's topic, the amazing honeybee with Nate Brauner.
Has to be that. The Colonial Beekeepers is one of the beekeeping clubs in this area. There's also Williamsburg area club that started up about 5 years ago or so, and so they're active in this area too. So, but there are two beekeeping clubs in the area, and I title it the Amazing Honeybee, and everyone says, "Well, of course you think honeybees are interesting and amazing and all of that stuff," but most of us remember as a kid stepping on a bee or getting a bee sting or something like that. And most people, when they think of honeybees, don't think of the word amazing going with it. And I get that, but I want to give you a couple of different ways to frame it or to look at honeybees that might change your perspective on them. And what I really want to get to is the question of what's so special about honeybees? I mean, what really is special about them? They're not the only pollinator that's out there. Honeybees were introduced actually to North America in 1622. They were brought over on a resupply mission to Jamestown, and they established some colonies there, and then they quickly escaped and naturalized in the area and spread throughout the American colonies. But they're not native to Virginia. In Virginia, we have about 438 different native bees that are native to Virginia, and most of the pollinators, there's lots of other pollinators. And some pollinators, like the bumblebee, do buzz pollination, which physically is a much more efficient way of dispersing pollen than what the honeybees do. And honeybees sting sometimes. So, why would they be really special? And so hopefully by the end of this, I'll be able to answer that for you. But, I want to acknowledge up front that there are a lot of people who think of honeybees and think of them as something that is better to be avoided or get out of my yard as opposed to something that they want to welcome into their yard. And maybe I can give you some reasons to think otherwise by the end of this. Now, Colonial Beekeepers Association, in cooperation with Cooperative Extension, run a swarm hotline. And it's a hotline number that you can call anytime you see a swarm of honeybees. You get a beekeeper to come out there and relocate them to a safe place for the bees. Doesn't cost anything if it's just a swarm. So you don't charge anything. The beekeeper gets some bees that they put in their apiary. They're happy. Not there anymore. But I get a lot of calls about bees. Everyone's calling me about bees, and it's not always honeybees. They're with 438 different native species of bees, and a flivera, and all the other things that are out there, like wasps and hornets, that are not included in that 438 number. There's a lot of things out there that look like a honeybee and might be identified as a honeybee, but really aren't honeybees. And you can see that on the slide here. For your reference, in case you can't read all of the fine print on there, the lower left, that's Apis mellifera, Western honeybee. That looks fairly similar, not to me, but lots of people think that looks very similar to this right here, which is a nasty little bugger. It's a yellow jacket. And yellow jackets are just, honeybees are incentivized not to sting you. If they sting you, they're going to die. They have a barb on their stinger that'll pull out a large amount of their intestines and die. The yellow jacket is not that way. The yellow jacket can sting you just for fun, which they do. I mean, they seem to see it as a natural death cycle. And so sometimes they'll just sting you for the heck of it multiple times. So many times when I get calls, I ask them to provide me a picture so I can tell whether it's a yellow jacket or whether it's a honeybee, or maybe it's, yes, move your sign over. Sorry. Yeah. Does that work better for you? Awesome. What about that one? Is that one in the way? Okay, good. Am I in the way here? Yeah, but you know, bumblebees also look very similar, over in the top picture, right, in the top picture right over here, that's carpenter bee right there. I mean, in towards, Solidario, and that's a honeybee, you can see the size difference between them there. This is the American bumblebee right here on Estonia, and the honeybee is coming in towards Estonia, so you can see there's a very definite size difference as well as the coloration differences in them. But there's big differences. One of the big things that I get in the fall a lot is I get calls about bees. Now, we have all probably grew up on cartoons in here, right? And we all know how honeybee hives or nests are depicted in cartoons, right? It's at the end of a range, and it's down in some ball shaped things, right? That is what honeybee nests look like, right? No. That common in what these are in here, these boots. There we go. These are nests of bald-faced hornets. Now that sounds really, really scary, bald-faced hornets. But bald-faced hornets are actually something that you really want around your yard because they are not aggressive. They are omnivores as opposed to bees that are herbivores. They will eat not just the pollen and the nectar that they'll go out and cultivate, but they eat other insects like mosquitoes. If you don't like mosquitoes around your property, you might like having full-faced hornets because they really do eat mosquitoes. Right. They're very non-aggressive. This nest right there, I was as close to that nest as I am to this sign behind me, talking on my cell phone with my head about this close to it for about 10 minutes, and they never came out and hassled me at all. Never. Now, if I had grabbed that branch and moved it around, you bet that they'd be out there, trying to get me to leave. But just walking by it or being in the general vicinity of it, it's not a problem. Most people will find them in their trees, about 10 feet up in the trees, and they'll be scared of it because it looks scary. But in actuality, it is not, and it's a good thing to have. I get a lot of calls about that because these also, too many, look like bees, and they're in what most people are used to seeing where bees live. So there's a little bit of education that goes into the whole thing of what a bee actually looks like. Now, with those 438 different species of bees, if I were to take them, in North America, there's about 4,000 different species of bees that are native to North America. If I graph them out on a graph, and on the x-axis, or on the y-axis, I would put the number of bee species, and on the x-axis, I would put the degree of sociality between the bees or the amount that they work together. The graph would look something like this. The vast majority of the bees that we have in North America are solitary creatures. In other words, they go about their life, they forage on their own, they might meet up with someone from their species of the opposite sex to mate, but that's going to be about it. And then beyond that, there are a limited number that swoops. I am just messing this up left and right. Here we go. We'll go. Here we go. There we go. Just keep hitting it while I'm into the 12th up here. Okay. A small number of them live and work cooperatively together. And the advantage to that is they can share resources when they do that. Because of that, they can support a higher population density. So you start seeing some communal behavior. If you want some examples of that, these are semi-social. They live together in an aggregation, but they take care of their young individual. Bumblebees have some young rearing cooperation that goes on, and they're what entomologists call primitively eusocial. But we have one species in North America that is what is considered highly eusocial. In other words, they have differentiation of tasks within their society that allows them to share work and be more efficient in doing that. And because they are able to do that, there's a couple of things about them. number one, they can support a higher population density than they would otherwise be able to do, right? Number two, they can get a lot more done that way. Now, there are not that many highly used social organisms that we have around. Can anyone think of another highly used social organism that we have in our general area? In our ants, most ants are highly used social. Anything else? Termites are also highly used social. One other one that is technically pro-social, but it's really the same, a lot of the same characters as highly social are humans. And if you think about it, we have a fairly good sized population on the Virginia Peninsula, everywhere from Williamsburg on down to Newport News and Hampton. But imagine still gathers. Could this area support the kind of population that we have if we were all still hunter-gatherers working on our own? And the answer is absolutely not. But because we have differentiation, because we have doctors and lawyers and teachers and journalists, shipyard workers, and you name it, librarians, or whatever we have in our system, because we have all of that, and we're all working together cooperatively, we can be more efficient, we can support a higher population density in a given area that we otherwise, right? That the 8 billion people on the planet because we work cooperatively together. The honeybees are a lot the same way. They can support a high adult population. Insects go through diapause or go through their winter dormancy and in either their egg or their pupal form. And with honeybees, because they're highly useful, they can go through survive the winter with a large population of adults, which is really unusual. And the reason for that is because when you are dealing with a highly used social organism, you start thinking of them as a superorganism, not as a collection of individual organisms, but as a superorganism. Let me give you an example for that. Behaviorally, it makes no sense for a honeybee, a guard bee, who is storming the entrance to the hive, to leave the hive to dissuade a bear from coming and getting into the hive and try and ward it away, or to sacrifice itself, stealing the bees and try and dissuade it from getting into the hive. If you're thinking about it from the motivation of that individual insect, it's going to die at the end of that encounter. There's no motivation individually for it to do that and end its life. But if you're thinking about it as a highly social organism, and this is a superorganism here, and that's just a part of it, well, then that makes a whole lot of sense. You sacrifice one small organism so your superorganism can survive. So you start seeing behavioral changes with that, and that multiplies itself through a lot of other things that I'll bring up later in this. But the highly social part of honeybees is one of the things that make them very unique for us and very valuable. Now, I told you where honeybees don't live in nature. They don't live at the ball at the end of a branch, right? But in actuality, where honeybees live in the wild are in the cavities typically of trees. In temperate areas like ours, where it gets cold in the winter, they need to have a little bit of protection around them. So they will typically go into a cavity in the tree and they will build their honeycomb into it. Now, they won't make that cavity in the tree. They're not going to excavate it or make it any bigger. They will use what's available, right? Maybe a woodpecker went in there, maybe it was created by rock. There's a whole different host of reasons why you could have a cavity in the tree, but they will use that space and build their honeycomb in there, right? And so occasionally you'll see them build their honeycomb on the exterior of a tree, but that's a colony that in our area is not going to survive through the winter. But they'll build their colony in there. It's really nice. It's really snug in there, and it offers them some protection from the weather and from other predators being inside the tree. Now, for years and years, mankind has been keeping bees that we know of for historical records back for about 4,000 years. So for thousands of years, beekeeping would keep bees in something that would approximate that. I'll skip to this next slide for a second. So this cavity in the tree, it's a certain size, right? They're not making it any bigger or not. And starting in the springtime is the time that we have most of the flowers in our area are bloom. And so from the beekeeper's perspective, that's called the nectar flow. It starts at about the end of March, goes to about the beginning of June. During that time, there is an explosion in the amount of nectar resources that are available in our area. And the bees know that. So around about the beginning of February, so now, the queen will start laying eggs. She'll start laying a lot of them. She'll start laying 1,500 eggs a day. And she'll start rapidly expanding her population. So they are mature enough. They have time to mature so that by the time nectar flow starts, she has the forager population that she go out and take advantage of the nectar flow and get all those resources in. Once that nectar flow starts, then they bring in all these nectar resources. She keeps laying 1,500 eggs a day. And that population just explodes in size. Now, I remember watching Schoolhouse Rock when I was growing up, and I remember Elbow Room, right? And when I started expansion, and so when they started running out of Elbow Room, they all went west, right? They loaded up on supplies, got on wagon trains, and they went west. Well, the bees are somewhat similar because they're highly usocial too. So what they decided to do is when they start running out of room in there, they realize that, and they start to make a new queen. Actually, they start to make a whole bunch of sheep. And right before those new queens emerge, the old queen will take about half of the bees and they will go to find a new home. Right before they do that, they provision themselves, just like the settlers did. They gorge themselves on honey, they eat as much as they can, and then they take off and they go flying with the queen. And they view that about the same way, because the queen is all of their mother, and she has not flown since her mating flight. So this is a unique experience for her. They view that as just as exciting, and a 2-year-old little girl views going to Disneyland for the first time, standing next to Minnie Mouse and holding Minnie Mouse's hands. It's so wonderful, and nothing else in the world matters right then to that little girl, right? Seeing it, it's magical. That's how the bees feel about flying with the queen. What we know that as it is a swarm. Now, I would hazard a guess that most people, when you hear the word swarm, you think of a potentially life-ending dangerous event. But in actuality, these are fat, dumb, and happy bees who are flying with mom and have never been happier in their life. And they're not interested in seeing any. Well, they just want to fight where they're going. And because that queen hasn't, she's weak, and so she can only fly short distances before she needs to rest. So you will see her laying on something, and all the rest of the bees want to be right next to mom, so they crowd her. And that's these balls of bees look like up here. That's where this comes from. Is all of them trying to cluster around and protect mom and be close to her and cheering, mom. So, there'll be so much of them that they will bend the branch down on a tree with just so much weight hanging onto them. Now, this is when most people are pretty sure that they're about to die. And we have videos of people going and taking a gallon bucket of gasoline and trying to throw it in, or taking a can of rain and trying to spray them. And that's about the worst thing. Because all they want to do is find a new home, right? And all you have to do is call a network giant. If you that's call the swarm hotline. We'll send a beekeeper out there and just put that out. Doesn't cost anything. You get the bees taken care of. The bees will take off, and they will, they'll be the beekeeper sure, and everybody's happy. But this is not a dangerous event right here. Most swarms could even be caught. I have been in the middle of a swarm wearing a polo shirt and shorts and never had a problem with them being all around me. It's actually invigorating. It's a really neat event where you can calm down and just watch them all around you. It's amazing. But that's what the swarms are doing. Now we want to get these swarms before they move into someplace. Because you know how in nature they use cavity in the tree, right? Well, they view a little crack inside your house and the space in between your phone joints or in between your studs in your wall as a cavity and a structure, right? And they have no problems using that cavity either. You want to catch them before they go in there, because once you have to start cutting holes in people's houses and pulling them out, that's pretty involved work. not free, and it's, and we want to stop that from happening. Before that happens. Now, they're not damaging your house when they're in there, but they are living there, and some people aren't fans of that. So for 4,000 years, like what I was saying, we've had bees, man, so bees that, overturn baskets and overturn, pots, things like this that we call scabs. In fact, when they were brought over to Jamestown in 1622, this is how they brought them over to Jamestown. And the idea is the beekeeper would take some honey and some wax and smear it in there, and the bees would find it, and they go in through the hole, and they would build up a whole bunch of honeycomb in there. And then they lay their eggs there and raise their young bees in there. They would put their honey stores in there, between the nectar and the honey, and the beekeeper would go by and lift it up. And after a while, this would get heavier and heavier until the beekeeper's like, oh, there's so many honey in there. So the beekeeper will pick it up. We'll reach inside, we'll pull out all the honeycomb, we'll crush it down, and then they have honey. And for centuries, millennia, that is really important. They didn't have high fructose corn syrup or maple syrup. They didn't have very many ways to sweeten their food. Honey was really important to them. But what's the problem of doing things that way? Well, the bees don't like it because they're destroying their home. You know, when bees make honeycomb, I've got honeycomb up here that you can check out, later. And this honeycomb right here, it takes bees the equivalent energy of 8 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of beeswax. And you look at this, and this honeycomb that they're making here, these are perfect hexagons in here. Now they make this in the dark, by feel, no rulers or anything, and they make them all identically sized. It's kind of amazing that they can do that, because I couldn't do that in the dark, no ruler or template or anything. But they will make all of this honeycomb themselves, they'll extrude the wax in their body, and then they will fatten the honeycomb, and they'll use it for all other things. It's very strong, and it's also very delicate. So when they rip it out of the scabs there, and then the bees have to go through all the work putting that out again. Not a very sustainable practice, but that's the way we did it. We always did things that way. Until about 1850. The 19th century was the age of the naturalists, right? I think Charles Darwin, Origin of Species, I think was published in 1858. So the middle of the 19th century was huge for naturalists. People who were educated, who wanted to learn more about the natural world. And one of those people, just like Charles Darwin was a trained minister. His name was Lorenzo Langstroth. And he loved bees. That was his shit. And he looked at bees and he figured out that bees need about 1/4 of an inch of space to move. But if that space is bigger than 3/8 of an inch, they'll start making honeycomb and filling in that space. So he figured out that if he could maintain spaces in a hive between 1/4 of an inch and 3/8 of an inch, that he could make a different beehive. And so what he did was he developed a removable frame hive. Something similar to this, where he could have a box that has frames in it. And he could pull out the frame, and he could inspect the frame. He could see how the bees are doing in there. He could see if he needed to help them out in any way, if he needed to provide treatments. He could see if they were full of honey. You can even take the honey out without destroying the beeswax, and then at the end of the whole thing, he could put it back in the hive and bees could use it some more. Revolutionized the way that we kept bees, even though we had been doing it very well for about 4,000 years, even 170 years ago, right? It's a great example of using the scientific method, what I tell kids when I visit schools, to figure out a new solution and a practical solution to a problem that we didn't know that we had, but there's a better way in this case to build a beehive, right? And it's revolutionized beekeeping so much that around the world, almost everyone keeps bees in a variation of Langstroth's design with removable frames. It is illegal in the US. In all 50 states, you keep bees in the skep anymore that does not have removable frames. Right? Now you have to keep bees in a hive that has removable frames. Now it can take a whole bunch of different forms, doesn't have to have a nitrogen system. But there's another benefit to this as well. It's not just that I can be non-destructive when I go here. It also means that with this, once the bees population gets really big, what are they gonna do? They're gonna swarm, right? No more rooming. I can't add on another basket of others. So with this, I can put on another box on top of this and expand the row. Now they don't want to swarm because they have more room. I can put on another box on top of that. And then that, so like, and you can see some of how I clear my ears. So those are 4 boxes tall. I get up to 7 boxes tall in the height of an edge from some of my hives. I mean, to the extent that I have to get up on the ladder to take off the top boxes when I'm starting this stuff. And when this is full, this weighs about 50 to 60 pounds. And they use this, it's called propolis that they make, align the boxes together to know the gas in it, you know. So I have to wait. And I'm picking up on the top of the ladder, it's full of bees, and I have to not fall off the ladder and get that down so I can sit down. So beekeeping becomes a rather physical sport and for the days when it's really that big. But the point here is that there are still better ways to do things, even after we've been doing things for thousands of years. We have an approved solution and a best practice on doing it. Sometimes there's a better way to do things, and this is a prime example of doing that than these teachers or that national laws with that. So I want to take about 10 minutes. I want to geek out on a little biology here. Okay, now I promise there's a point to it, so it's not just, you know, environment science and science. Although I think that's cool. Not everyone is along those lines, but let's talk about basic biology with bees. We know that we have in bees, we have boys and girls in bees, and we call the boys drones, and we call the girls workers or the queen. Okay, and in the hive, all of the work that is done in the hive, whether it's building the honeycomb, whether it's keeping it clean, whether it's tending to the larva, the nurse bees, or whether it is whether it's constructing new comb, or whether it's starting the hive, or whether it's doing the foraging, all of that work is done by the females. All of it. The drones don't take part in that at all. So, you know, going to elementary schools and I told kids that, and the girls are like, that's not fair. Well, I know it's not fair, but that's the way it works. But, you know, the drones have quite a big job to shoot. I'll get that in a little bit. But the other thing to talk about, guys, there's the workers and the queen, the females, are the only ones with stingers. So if you ever get stung by a bee, it was a girl that stung. It wasn't a boy. They don't even have stingers. Their whole function in life is to be big lovers. So when I tell the kids that, they say, well, you know, so what's the lesson learned? You know, they're not sure what to say. And I said, well, don't make the girls mad. So, but what's fact is that that he goes through all the work in the hive. Now, the queen, it's rather interesting. The queen, she is 5 days old, 5 days after emerging out of the cell as an adult first time. She will go on a meeting. Now, she'll normally go on about a couple of meeting flights, but she will fly away from the hive. And usually, the meeting flight can last anywhere from about 20 minutes to 40 minutes on average. She will fly, you know, a mile, 2 miles away from the hive, and she will fly up into the sky into an area where the drones hang out. We call them. And we didn't know about this until about the early 1960s, about exactly how it all transpired, but we call them drone congregations. They're about anywhere between 20 to 60 feet up, around the trees. They are the same from year to year. They're something that we don't understand that causes them to congregate in specific areas. But we call them drone congregation areas. Now the name is a little bit unimaginative, but for our intents and purposes, let's just consider them a big sandbar and song. Right? And the virgin queen will fly up there into this, putting off hormones like crazy. And the drones will come, and one by one, they will come up, they will mate with her, they will fall off, leaving their endophallus with her and all of their sperm with her, and they will fall off dead into the ground. And the next drone will come along and mate with her, and she will mate with dozens of drones that way. And she'll take all the sperm that they give her, and she'll store it in her abdomen in a separate handful of spermatheca. She will store millions of sperm in her spermatheca. And because they're coming from all sorts of different drones, she has genetic diversity in her spermatheca. Okay? It's kind of cool that this queen can be laying eggs, you can have all sorts of genetic diversity. And so she get back to the hive, and she will go into the hive, and she will go on that honeycomb. Here's a really cool thing. She'll go around in this honeycomb in the dark, and she will feel the size of the honeycomb. And if it's a normal size honeycomb, she will lower her abdomen into there, and she will deposit one egg and one sperm, and that egg will then be fertilized, and it will become a female bee. But if she feels that this cell is slightly larger, and when I say slightly larger, the difference is about a millimeter or two in each dimension. Okay, so it's really not much. It's slightly larger. She will lower her abdomen in there and deposit one egg but no sperm. That egg will be unfertilized, and that will turn into a male bee. Because sexual determination in bees is determined, so with humans, we have 23 pairs of chromosomes, right? We're what scientists call diploid organisms. Pairs of organisms, we have two sets of chromosomes. It's a difference in our 23rd chromosome that determines whether we are male or female. XY for male, XX for female. Well, these are different. These are haplodiploids, so the males have one set of chromosomes, and that makes them haplo. But the females have two sets of chromosomes, and because there is a specific gene that only activates when there is a hanging gene on a partner chromosome, they are female. And so it is all driven by whether she lays a fertilized egg or an unfertilized egg. That's unique in our control over her body. And we don't have that kind of control over our bodies. But, the bees have that kind of control. And it allows the bees to make decisions about the sexual composition of the hive. Usually in the height of the nectar flow, there's about 90% females in the hive, and maybe up to 10% males in the hive. In the winter time, so I tell kids all of this. I tell them about all the work that my girls are doing, and I ask them, how many of you think it's a better deal to be a boy in the hive than a girl? Most of them say it's strange. I said, well, let me tell you, I'm always going to say, they have a certain amount of honey they store up to make it through the winter, even their hands. Right, and that's all they have. They're not going to get more during the winter. So what do you think the girls do with the boys who aren't helping out with their chores, aren't making their bed? They're just sitting around on the couch and want to eat. They figure out, and the boys don't. So when the hill goes through the winter time, it is only the females that are in the hive and go through the wet time. The hill eat. Princess Queen already has all this stored in the done. She's good to go. And by the way, that queen is mating with the drones in her own office, which seems his brothers know that. And those drones have to stay airborne in that drone congregation area for just stay airborne that whole time. That's a lot to do, just to do the biological function, economic genetics of the product. So this superorganism can pass on its genetics, which biologically is what this superorganism wants to do, right? The whole purpose of everything here is to pass on their genetic information. So the drones actually do have a very, very important role, and it's a tough role. But it's not doing all the work of making honey and stuff like that. So if we're looking at what that looks like, this is an actual, I have a small microscope, a handheld microscope, and they have you can see what an actual egg looks like at the bottom of the cell right here in one of my hives. But this just kind of gives you a gestational timeline. And this is another fascinating thing, or something I find fascinating about honeybees, because that queen lays a female egg, right? She lays it in the cell, and in about 3 days, that egg is going to hatch. And the nurse bees will come around, and they will produce a food for that baby larva, small little white worm. That's called royal jelly, and they'll produce it with their mandibular and their hypopharyngeal glands, and they'll secrete it and produce it from it. They make it in very small quantities, but it is the perfect food that larva needs to grow. It is everything that larva needs to grow. You know, it's the best food in the world. And they'll feed it that for about 2 to 3 days, exclusively that. And after those 2 to 3 days, they'll start working in some nectar, some pollen, some water for the diet, and that larva is going to grow much bigger, and it will completely fill up one of these cells here. And once it happens at about day 9, after that egg was laid, and they will tap over that cell with a wax gag. That larva will spin a cocoon and incubate inside of here for about 12 days until it emerges on day 21 as a grown worker bee and going about starts taking care of the nursery function. Being that cell, taking care of the larva that's so dead. But if those bees only fed that larva royal jelly, they never worked in that pollen and nectar, that water into the diet, but only fed it royal jelly, that is going to grow much faster. And they're going to have to make the cell about 4 times as big as it is. And still, it only by day 8, it will have completely filled up that bigger cell. And they're going to tap it off, and in only 8 days under pupation, that's going to emerge as a fully developed queen bee. And the only difference between this egg, whether this egg is laid right here, turns into a worker bee that lives for about 6 weeks after emerging, or into a queen bee that can live for up to 5 years after emerging, is what is fed when it's a developing larva. If it is only fed the really good stuff, its body will fully develop into a queen bee. If it doesn't, then its reproductive system won't fully develop, other things won't fully develop, it'll be a smaller bee, and it will be a longer. So I thought kids, for all intents and purposes, kids are kind of our larva. It matters what they put into their body when they're developing larvae, because if they put in healthy food, their body's healthier, and they're going to, well, the bees show us this. But if they don't, and they eat too many Doritos, then their body are going to be quite as healthy, and, they might not live quite as long. And the bees feed us that runs as well. So you can see here the difference between a normal cell, your honeycomb cell, and a queen cell that's down here. They're oriented vertically, not horizontally, and they're quite a bit bigger than normal size cells. You can also see on these slides, on these pictures, the differences between the boys and the girls. And probably most of you are looking at them and saying, well, they're all just bees, but I circled the drones on there, the males. They're a little bit stockier, their eyes are a little bit bigger, and they look a little, I say they look like linebackers. I'm not sure that that's accurate, but that's how I envision them. But they're a little bit stockier and fatter, and so those are the boys and the girls on it. Now, if you want to see what the picture looks like and all of these pictures are around my hives here. This is the queen out of one of my hives. You can tell because she's got a crown. And I tend to put a dab of yellow paint on the back of my queens on the thorax so I can more easily see them. Now, I can find a queen without that on them, but when I have a hive that has 60,000 bees in it, it sure does help to be able to see that queen and identify her and know where she is. You'll also notice that there's a difference between the wax that's brownish in color or a darker tan, and this wax here, which is very, very white in color. This is brand new beeswax that's been built in the last 2 weeks, and it almost comes out white in color. Then after use over time, wax is lipophilic. It starts attracting things from the environment, maybe a couple of root cycles in there, and large people were raised in there. And these are acidious cleaners, but you can't completely clean everything up. And over time, it gets darker and darker. So I pull out that wax from time to time. But just after honey, and I have all the talk on all the health and this clean, that just the time has very defined health benefits, and this isn't just old folk tales. This is peer-reviewed research that shows the health benefits. wax also has some of those benefits too. When you look at it as a superorganism, the wax plays a huge role in the immune system of these superorganisms. And so really, wax is a fantastic thing, very valuable thing for the honeybees, but it's a fantastic resource. Not just the honey, the wax as well. And you can get another view down into the cells here. And the reason why I put this on here is you can see how easy it is to see the egg at the bottom of that cell right there. With the egg at the bottom of that cell right there. And those are things that I have to look for when I'm inspecting my hives to see how well those hives are doing when I'm going through the hives and inspecting honey in them. But that's the biology side of it, right? So I want to talk a little bit more about the pollination side of it. But as I do that, I want to paint a picture for you. When those bees leave the hive and they go out from the hive, they will fly up to 3 miles away from the hive. We'll visit 50 to 100 flowers on the flight. We'll grab all of that nectar and that pollen, and we'll bring it back to the hive, drop it off, and then we'll go back and do it another 14 times a day. So that would be like any of us in here, being here, running up to Richmond, visiting 50 to 100 grocery stores, grabbing all those groceries, running back home with them to Williamsburg, dropping them off, and then going back and doing it another 14 times. And when I say running, I don't mean in the car. All right, well, unfortunately, for our side, that's what applications that are going, right? An incredible amount of work. After doing that for 3 weeks, they work themselves to death doing it. And they're working themselves to death to gather nectar and pollen to make honey and bee bread and other resources so that their sisters, who they haven't made as eggs, be able to make it through the winter, right? Another example of the behavior of a superorganism, them all working together cooperatively for the good of the superorganism. Doesn't make any sense for them to work themselves to death from an individual perspective, but they do that. It's pretty interesting about that. Butterflies, wasps, even a lot of bees, they are, they're pollinators, but what are they paying them as nectar? They're going out to that flower to grab that nectar from that flower, and in the process they get some of the pollen on them, and they take that to the next one. But when a butterfly goes to a Contonia and gets the nectar from that, it might go to a sunflower next to get the nectar from there. But that pollen from that Contonia is not going to pollinate a sunflower, right? It only pollinates species specific. It has to go to another flower of the same species. When that honeybee leaves the hive and goes to 50 to 100 flowers on that flight, they are species specific. They will only go to the same species of flower on that flight, which makes them an incredibly valuable pollinator. Because when they go to those flowers, now it might be some flowers on this flight, it might be honey on the next one, it might be salvia on the next one, you name it. But it's going to be species specific on that same flight, which is very valuable from the plant's perspective. And I also want to talk about another perspective on this whole thing. We think, I ask kids what they know about honeybees, they'll tell me that they make honey and they sting. And another couple things, but I'll always get those two things out. But then the next thing that I asked them about is, give me an example of your favorite animal that would never harm another animal, whole other day. Give me an example, and they'll tell me their bunny rabbit, or their dog, or their cat, or maybe a butterfly, right? And I'll say, well, your dog, your dog might be the nicest animal in the world, but if it ever catches that squirrel in your backyard, what's it going to do? And it's right, it's going to eat it. That's what dogs do. They need to do that to survive. It's very, it's my vegetable garden. It's going to damage and destroy a lot of vegetables on the planet. That fly might be really nice, but if it's something it's a caterpillar, and it will denude or damage and destroy lots of plant material that its energy needs to survive, because it's how energy needs to survive. That's how it has to move through our food web. It has to damage or destroy another living thing. Every living animal, on Earth has to damage or destroy another living thing in order to get the food that it needs to survive. Every animal except for the honeybee. and a couple of other bees too. But the honeybee is the only organism that I know of, and a couple of other bees too, that in the normal course of its life will not harm another living thing, will only help other things. A honeybee only eats pollen and nectar. The nectar the plant makes specifically to lure the honeybees up, and the pollen, the plant wants that honeybee to take so it can sexually reproduce, right? It's not harming the plant at all when it takes those two things. And the only time that a honeybee would ever hurt something is in self-defense of itself or of its young, which is, we should aspire to do something that good, and, in our community, but the honeybees do that. So when you think of it that way, they really operate more nature's altruists out there doing some really good work for a natural world. Let's put it in a practical sense though, and I want to talk about how valuable they are to agriculture. And to do that, I want to talk about almonds. Now I'll say this up front, it's not just about almonds, but the almonds give us a really good example of how valuable the honeybees are. Now, honeybees or almonds are not native to California. 90% of the world's almonds are grown in California, but they're not native to California. Does anyone know where almonds are native? Actually Persia, but very close. So Iran, that's where they originally came from. And because they grow so well in San Joaquin Valley in California, 90% of the world's almonds are grown in Central California. And to the tune that they bloom, they start their bloom time in another about 2 weeks, Valentine's Day, and they bloom for 3 weeks, right? Now, California is a lot warmer than it is here in most parts of California, but in California, it's still winter in the middle of February, right? And most native pollinators are in their diapause or in their dormancy and are not out pollinating during that time of year. And so you don't have pollinators there to pollinate those trees. And if you don't have pollinators there to pollinate the trees, you don't get an almond. So we have about 1.6 million acres of almonds in California. Now that's as of November 22. Okay, and each one of those almonds, acres of almond trees, farming is a very is an industry with tight margins, so they have to be efficient with it. So they figure the optimal density for almond trees is about 112 trees per acre. And if you do the math and public on that, it comes out to about 180 million almond trees in California, right? Give or take a couple. And for each one of those almond trees, they have about 28,000 blooms on each almond tree. You have further on, that's 5 trillion flowers that have to be visited at least once, but more likely 3 to 4 times to set fruit and be pollinated if they are going to produce pollen, right? That's a lot of work in a 3-week period. And so that they also figured out that it takes about 2 hives, about 20,000 bees in a hive to do that work in California, which comes out to about 3.2 million hives needed in California during that 3-week period to pollinate the almonds. And to get them there, it takes between 6,000 to 12,000 flatbed trucks to bring them from all over the US. A lot are overwintered in Texas and Florida, but to take them to California so they can do that. And it's not just California, it's not just the almonds, because after the almonds, it's the cherries. And after the cherries, it's the plums, it's pears, it's every crop that we have that cannot be wind pollinated, which really comes down to our cereal crops that are pollinated. Most of our crops in America, because we farm in huge super farms now with monoculture agriculture, right, to be more efficient. Well, the downside of that is we don't have a diverse landscape around there. So you have to bring in pollinators to do that pollination. But the downside of that is you can't leave those pollinators here because while for 3 weeks out of the year, it might be open season to have the golden corral with 3 meat on things. What's growing on that crop? Nothing, because they make sure that because it takes 6 sources of money and it's growing, right? So there's nothing there for native pollinators to even exist on anyways, even if it was during the time that they're out of dipods, they couldn't do it. Here's the other problem with this. How many hives are there in the United States of honeybees? Any guesses? As of November of 22, same time as the rest of the state, 2.8 million hives.
Okay.
We don't even have enough, and that counts the hives in my backyard. We don't even have the number of hives that are required by the almonds to do this, let alone everything else it needs to have. Oh, by the way, anyone remember, I think it was Hurricane Ian went through Florida in August of 22, right? Goes through Florida, just about the same time that a lot of beekeepers had went their hives down there to pollen to get the nectar from the pepper trees that were going to be blooming there, and then overwinter them there, right? In that, just the acute event of Hurricane Ian, it wiped out between 150 to 350,000 hives in Florida. That's 10% of the US population. You think that wasn't adults 23 during pollination?
Yeah.
Huge ripple effects. We are operating without a huge margin with honeybees in our country. So when we start seeing, disturbances like that, it has ripple effects throughout the agricultural community. We don't have this in America. We farmed on family farms for a number, machinery stand, we have no problem with the old, we stop things there. Well, we can't go to that model and be as efficient or produce as much food as we can this way, which means food is impossible. And we're going to make less of it. People are going to starve. So if we don't want, we've got to figure out a way that we can ensure the health of honeybees to be able to do this pollination. Or figure out a different model. This is the model that we use, and honeybees are indispensable to it because they're the only one we can move around. They're the only superorganism that we have in the US that does pollination, right? The only one that we can overwinter since adults. This is where that superorganism stuff comes. It's absolutely vital. And like I said, it's not just the almonds, all the other crops that we produce, the pears, it's the cherries, it's the cucumbers, blueberries, although, there is some role for bumblebees in some of those crops as well. But we need the honeybees from across the US. The almonds are just the clearest example, and they're the start of the whole season. So right now, there is a huge migration, the largest migration in the world is going on right now, as all these honeybee hives are being brought out to California, going through agricultural inspection, moving out near the San Juan Valley. It's absolutely amazing to see that. And that's just using them as pollinators. We're not even talking about the value of honey in here, which is pretty incredible. And we can get into that. That's a whole nother talk that I give on the products and analyze and the goodness behind that. So a lot of people start saying about at this point, well, if they're so critical, then how can I go that? And one of the things you have to understand when you're addressing that is the bloom times of different plants or ranges. And I already told you about the nectar flow in East Virginia and how it goes in our area from about end of March to the beginning of June. During that time, there's plenty of resources out there. So I love having azaleas in my yard, right? And lots of people do. But those azaleas aren't really helping out the honeybees at all because there's so many resources available. In fact, I don't even think about planting anything in the springtime in my yard because there are so many resources. But once that nectar flow ends, there's very, very little around us, especially in our areas around here, that are going to be nectar resources for the honeybees. We go into the nectar dearth in summer and then into the fall. Because this summer, I want you to drive around and I want you to look in most people's yards. And I want you to see what they have blooming in their yards in July and August. And you cannot count big myrtle trees. Number 5 great myrtles are not native to the United States. They're native to Asia, but they're not native to plant, and they have nectar or pollen resources that they offer. They are just, they're like that active person that you remember from high school that has nothing to add to the conversation. Right? So that's great words. But how many people, I mean, pollinators have symbiotes, have zingers, have different things that produce nectar and pollen. So, and then if you start looking around and say, well, what are the best nectar producing plants around? You can find a veritable dearth of information in peer-reviewed literature that's available. There's some. It's I want to where we know that places with University of Florida, we're beginning with some of our researchers at Virginia Tech, and went through the literature that exists and came up with the best research plan for our area. And it's a list of 100 on this that has trees, shrubs, perennials, and annuals on it. There was bloom types, it was color, it was height, sun, and water. And so these are, it's a collaborative effort between going and beekeepers in the bar extension. So this is something, and I share with guys, some changes on your own, share with you guys that at your outreach events, if you're doing that, if you're doing notification, this is a great thing to be handing out. So talking about pollinators. It doesn't just these, you know, it's great for all pollinators, or important for plants that we can be planting to provide nectar resources. So that's available here if you like to if you want to this is still a chart in comparison to Northern Virginia. So when I talk about what's hurting bees, the number one is loss of habitat. You know, we cut down all the trees, we clear cut land, and we put it in a housing development, and it happens all over the places in New York County. I'm all for affordable housing, and we need that, but the way that we develop the land is really tough because we take an entire forest that have all those resources. We clear cut it, we put up the houses, and then when we put up the houses, how do we landscape it? We landscape it with grass that has no ecological value at all. We put in introduced species like Andina and fox, crepe myrtles. And those are introduced species that have very little ecological value and have no value for pollinators at all. So if we're going to be addressing the problem, part of it has to do with reestablishing habitat in individual backyards. So that's something that we can all do. Yes.
I'm curious, this goes back a little bit, but because there's only a certain number of queen bees that each, I mean, is that random or?
Oh, no, it's not random at all.
So percentage of every.
So the hives are very deliberate. Usually there's only one queen per hive, although we do know that there are certain instances when there is like mother daughter pair that would be in there, especially in the springtime. You can see that, but that's in a minority of the hives. But they are very deliberate about that, and it goes back to that biology section that I was talking about how they make queens. And that I'm giving a whole talk on that on Saturday.
For each birthing season, does a queen produce 8% other queens?
No, it's actually workers that make those decisions. We say queen, and we, Elizabeth, reigning monarch and all that, but that's not what that's an analogy for the queen in the hive, but that's an analogy for his mom. But she's the mother of all of the insects in there, but bees that make the most decisions in the hives, then they do it in a very there's a researcher at Cornell in the city who wrote a book called Honey Democracy, and talks about how they actually make the decision. And it's amazing because they vote up. They have votes, they have convince each other. It's almost like the Iowa caucuses, in some ways. So I mean, that's how they do it. That would take me down a rat hole a little bit, but yeah, they can make musical units and do that when they need to. But a well-functioning hive only really needs one queen at a time. So one of the things is, if you're going to be helping the bees, is to reproduce some habitat in your yard. When there's and they encourage other people to do so. You have a great role for master gardeners to be advocating for something like that. one of the other things that goes along with something that we teach here in Master Gardener training, this is a huge thing. Now, I used to use pesticides in my yard and use herbicides in my yard. I haven't done much until use. My garden is performing much better now than I ever did before. Okay, but I want to admit, and I give a whole other talk on mosquito abatement, but I want to talk about this just a little bit. Neonicotinoids. Have a show again how many people are familiar with neonicotinoids and the issues there. Okay, I will tell you that neonicotinoid was an effort by scientists to reduce the amount of pesticides that were used across. Because back in the 50s and early 60s, we would broadcast spray pesticides on crops, kill oxy, squat purpose, right? They chew on vascular tissue of the curvit, say the cucumber, squat, and they suck the sap out of it, and then that's how they kill the plant. As they try to get it. Well, the sprayers want to find a way that they broadcast spray and just target these insects that are killing the crop. So it would only affect the ones that are chewing on the vascular tissue, right? So they developed a seed code, a pesticide that's going to get absorbed by the plant into the plant tissues, and then it would only poison the insects that are chewing on the vascular tissue, which is in the plant, and that's where neonicotinoids came from. Problem with that is that it's not just absorbed into the vascular tissue, it's absorbed into the pollen and nectar and all the other parts of the plant as well. Now, the next question that comes up is, will it kill a honey? And the answer to that is no, it won't kill a honey. But it will kill a honey. Is honeybees have it, you remember how I told you to go 3 miles from the hive, it's 50 times the fire, they can find their way back to their hive. They can do that by using the sun, they use the earth, they can sense the Earth's magnetic field, they can do a lot of different things kind of purposes. After exposure to neonicotinoids, they don't have this currently. And so they can't find their way back to the hive. So no, it doesn't kill them, but from the single organism's perspective, it does. Right? So neonicotinoids bind plants that are not treated and bind seeds that don't have that red or that blue coating on them before you plant them. That's really important if you want to minimize the neonicotinoids that are out. And they use integrated pest management to control the squat bugs and things like that. The big bad though are pyrethroids. And the quick 3-minute version on this is since we got rid of DDT, pyrethroids are the main way that we control mosquitoes in our diet. It's chemicals. It targets, it kills the adult version of the mosquito. We've been using it since the 1960s. And the way that the pitch goes from whoever you have come out and bog in your yard goes like this. We use a chemical that's derived from the sentinel product, so it is an all natural product. And what we do is we put it in microdroplets, we blow around your yard, because that adheres to the plant's leaves better. Mosquitoes are not strong players, so they need to stop and they need to wrestle. Stop and they wrestle to get that off the heat, then it kills, and you have less mosquitoes in your yard. But after I spray it in your yard, then once it dries, it's perfectly safe for you. Your dog's in your yard, and it's not. And the thing is, what that guy told you in the sales station is 99% correct. It's what keeps leading out that's wrong. So people go and people take this strictly product and they'll apply it with IX anti-exposure suit and a respirator on. So what does a big associate, right? And you can spray it around your what you apply is what it says on the label, on the EPA label. The EPA label says it's highly toxic to cats, to amphibians, to fish, and to beneficial insects in your yard. So it will kill the mosquitoes, but it will also kill the dragonflies, the butterflies, the lightning bugs, the fireflies, all the bees, all the wasps, everything in your yard. And what we also won't tell you is we've been using the same product or same types of products for the last 60 years. What do you remember from biology when you use the same thing to control populations on Earth over 60 years? I think you're selecting for the resistant population, right? Well, it only takes a mutation in one of three genes in the mosquito that regulate sodium passage called enzymes to make them immune to the effects of hydrogens. And to the extent that studies are now showing, peer-reviewed studies are now showing us that hydrogens are only 10 to 38% effective at killing mosquitoes. In order to be an effective adulticide, it has to be 90%. So it's not effective at all at that against target population. But other organisms that can't mutate as well as the mosquitoes can, like honeybees, like fireflies, like butterflies, it's still very, very effective at killing those off. And so there are much more effective ways at doing mosquito control. I'm happy to come up here and give that talk. And this is the EPA label that's on there. And remember the training, read the labels, follow the labels. But they'll still spray this when you have flowers in your yard during the daytime when pollinators are present. It's highly toxic. If you know that, woman says. So that's something that you can advocate for is reduce or eliminate the use of pesticides. Same thing that we talked about in our debate, right? And then the last thing, the third big issue for honeybees is a parasite called the varroa destructor mite. Now, I won't go into that a whole lot because there's not a whole lot that people in the general public are doing about varroa destructor. That's speaking to beekeepers and the science community. Funding scientific research into this is critical. Okay? There's a whole other story that I can go. Massive science story which have been recently made in this by students at the University of Maryland. They have turned our understanding of this very destructive parasite on its head, and it wouldn't have happened unless you had funding research. And so funding scientific research is a huge motivator for that too. So moving out of here, two things that you can do. Plants that bloom in the fall and in the summer and have a diverse number of bloom lines. There's splits right down here. There's thoughtful lives on the string and reduce or eliminate your use of pesticides. But with that being said, I think I ran over just a little bit. And I'm sorry about that.
Thank you for watching a presentation of the James City County Williamsburg Master Gardener Association. For more educational videos, visit us at jccwmsbg.org.